You never really expect your day to change forever in the middle of nowhere. But life has a funny way of turning an ordinary afternoon into something that sticks with you, maybe even haunts you. The sun was still high but starting to dip when I eased my semi onto that long, cracked stretch of highway cutting through the heart of the desert. Just me, my rig, and the endless hum of tires on asphalt. The heat shimmered like a curtain across the road and everything around looked like it had been baked dry a long time ago. That kind of heat doesn't just burn, it presses down on you like it's trying to squeeze the life out. I've been doing this job for years, driving solo, hauling freight across states, mile after mile with no one but the radio for company. Guess I got used to it, the silence, the isolation. Most people would hate it, but for me it was normal. Then I saw her. A dented old sedan was pulled off to the shoulder, steam curling up from under the hood. Leaning against the door was a woman, looked exhausted, out of place, like a snapshot of something delicate left out in the middle of a dust storm. Her clothes were smudged, her hair tossed by the wind, and yet there was something in her eyes that caught me. Not fear exactly, more like fierce determination barely hanging on. I pulled over and killed the engine. Stepping down from the cab, my boots kicked up swirls of dust. She watched me come closer, wary at first, but not backing away. "You okay?" I asked, keeping my tone calm, not wanting to spook her. She glanced up, surprised. "Ran out of gas," she said, her voice tight like someone holding back more than they were letting on. I looked around, nothing but desert in all directions. Not even a billboard in sight. "Well, you're a good ways from anywhere," I said, already heading back to grab my spare gas can. "Lucky for you, I keep a little emergency stash." I handed over the can and a bottle of water I'd stashed under the seat. She took them like someone who hadn't had a break in a long time, then finally offered a half smile and introduced herself, "Emily." There was something about the way she said her name, hesitant, like she wasn't used to trusting people. But I've been down enough roads to know when someone's in real trouble. I didn't press. Didn't need to. The wind kicked up again, a dry gust that sent sand swirling around us. Emily leaned into it, shielding her eyes. "Been driving for hours," she said quietly, frustration just under the surface. "Thought I could make it to the next station, but my luck ran out." "Yeah, the road doesn't care much about plans," I said, glancing at the sun sliding lower in the sky. "I'm heading back toward a service center. Not far. If you want a lift, I've got room." She hesitated. I could see her weighing the risk, alone, out here, depending on a stranger. But finally she gave a small nod. "Thanks. That'd mean a lot." We climbed into my truck, the cab still warm from the sun, smelling like diesel and old vinyl. The dashboard lights flickered on as I turned the key and we rolled back onto the road, surrounded by nothing but orange sand and distant hills. For a while, we didn't say much. The engine hummed. The desert passed us by in waves. Then, out of the blue, she spoke. "Thanks. For stopping, I mean," she said, her voice softer now. "Not everyone would." I glanced over at her. Kindness doesn't cost much. Sometimes it's all we've got to offer. She looked at me and something passed between us, not romance or anything like that, but recognition. Like two people who've been through different storms but still know the feeling of getting caught in the rain. We started talking more after that. Light stuff at first, weather, roads, how bad the heat's been this season. But it didn't stay surface level. I found myself talking about my nights on the road, mischances, things I never thought I'd share. She listened, then offered pieces of her story about feeling stuck, about needing something to change but not knowing what. As the sun dipped low and the sky turned a deep orange-purple, the inside of that cab felt heavier, not in a bad way, just thick with the weight of two lives brushing against each other in the strangest of places. Neither of us said it, but I think we both knew that meeting on that stretch of highway wasn't random. Something had shifted. What I didn't know then, couldn't have guessed, was how that one good deed would crack open a whole new chapter. Emily wasn't just a stranded driver. And that day was only the beginning of something much bigger, something that would unravel every truth I thought I knew. The night crept in around us, stars just beginning to flicker overhead. And as we drove into the dark, I had no idea just how deep into the unknown we were headed. The highway kept stretching ahead like a thread into the dark, and inside the cab, our conversation started to shift into something deeper. It wasn't just small talk anymore. It was like peeling back layers we didn't even know we were carrying. "You ever feel like you're just floating?" I asked, not looking over, just focusing on the road and the yellow lines flickering past. Like every mile's just a reminder of what you're not doing, or where you're not headed. She was quiet for a second. Then I saw her glance over at me, her expression softer, like I'd said something that struck a nerve. "Every single day," she said quietly. "Sometimes I feel like I'm stuck living someone else's life, playing a part one never agreed to." There was a little quiver in her voice. Not dramatic, just real, honest. The kind of crack that comes from holding too much in for too long. I knew that feeling. Hell, I'd been carrying it across state lines for most of my life. So when she said that, I didn't need to ask what she meant. I already knew. The road doesn't go easy on you, I murmured. It doesn't let you forget the stuff you've messed up. Doesn't let you pretend. She let out a soft laugh, but it was the kind that's got more sadness than humor behind it. And yet, here I am, she said, stuck in the middle of nowhere with a busted car and a stranger who decided to help. Feels like something out of a book. Neither of us spoke after that for a while. The only sound was the hum of the engine and the occasional bump in the road. But inside that silence was something heavy. Not uncomfortable, just real. I found myself thinking about all the people I'd met in passing over the years. Faces that blurred together over gas station coffee and diner booths. Most of them I never saw again. But every one of them had a story. And something about Emily made me want to know hers. So, I asked gently, "What's your story, Emily? Something tells me you've been through more than you let on." She looked hesitant. Not afraid exactly, just uncertain. Like she was standing on the edge of something and didn't know if she should step forward. "I don't usually talk about it," she admitted. "But I've always felt like my life was written before I even had a say. Expectations, responsibilities, family stuff. It's like I've been living in a script someone else wrote." She let out a breath. "And honestly, I'm not even sure I've ever really lived." That hit me deep. "Living's not about sticking to some path someone else paved for you," I told her. "It's about finding your own way, even if that road's messy and full of potholes." She gave a small smile, one of those sad, hopeful ones that don't come easy. "I wish it was that simple," she said. "But every time I try to break free, it feels like my past, and everything tied to it, just pulls me right back in." Just then, a low rumble in the distance snapped both of us out of it. Headlights appeared in the rear view, getting closer. I tensed up immediately. Something about it didn't sit right. "Stay here," I said, reaching for the CB. "I'll handle it." A beat-up old pickup rolled to a stop beside us. Two guys climbed out, rough-looking, unreadable in the dim glow of the truck lights. One of them stepped forward, fake-friendly with a crooked grin. "Evening, friend," he called. "Looks like you've got some company." His voice was smooth, but there was an edge to it. A tone I'd heard before, the kind that made your instincts go on high alert. "What do you want?" I asked, keeping my voice steady but firm. The guy just smirked. "Just being neighborly. It's a lonely road. Never know who you might run into out here." I kept my eyes on them, ready for anything. Emily's hand reached over and rested on my arm, light, but it said a lot. I could feel her fear without her saying a word. "It's okay," I whispered, trying to convince both of us. "They'll move on." And thankfully they did. After a moment that felt like forever, the two men climbed back into their truck and drove off, disappearing into the night. But the tension stayed behind, lingering like smoke after a fire. That little run-in was a sharp reminder. Even something good, like offering help, can come with risk. You can never really know what's around the bend when you're living out here on the road. As the night deepened, something started to settle between us. Not romance, not yet. Something quieter. A kind of understanding. The things we'd said, the stuff we'd shared. It stitched a fragile connection between us, something neither of us expected. For me, a guy who spent years wrestling with the weight of mistakes and trying to outrun his past, that connection stirred up feelings I thought I'd buried. And for Emily, each mile seemed to peel back the layers she'd been hiding under for who knows how long. Outside, the desert was swallowed up by darkness. But inside that truck, there was a flicker of something. Not certainty, but possibility. A whisper that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't a random encounter. That maybe our paths crossing like this meant something. Something bigger than either of us had planned. By the time the sky started warming with the colors of dawn, the desert looked like it had been dusted in gold and rose. The kind of light that makes even the loneliest places feel like they've been kissed by something holy. I rolled into a small service station just as the sun broke the horizon. It wasn't much. A flickering neon sign, a couple of gas pumps, and a diner that looked like it hadn't changed in decades. But after a long night of driving and thinking, it felt like a real stop, not just a pit stop. Inside, we found a booth in the corner, tucked away from the soft buzz of early morning chatter and clinking coffee mugs. We sat down with 2 hot cups and a silence that felt different from before. Heavier. More urgent. Emily was staring out the window, her expression distant, like her mind was halfway across the country. I could tell something was shifting in her. Something big. "I need to tell you something," she said finally. Her voice so quiet it nearly got swallowed up by the noise around us. I looked at her, already feeling my stomach tighten. "What is it?" She hesitated, then took a long breath like she was preparing to break through her own walls. "I haven't been completely honest about who I am. That got my attention." "What do you mean?" She looked at me, eyes shining. Not with joy, but with something raw and exposed. "My life isn't normal. I wasn't just some stranded driver on a back road. My father's one of the wealthiest men in the country. Old money, corporate empire kind of thing." I blinked, trying to connect the dots between the dusty, exhausted woman I'd picked up and the world she was describing. Felt like something out of a dream or a movie. "So you're not just passing through?" I said slowly. She shook her head. "My name's Emily Langford. My whole life's been shaped by expectations, image, control. I ran away last night, not because I was lost, but because I needed to breathe, to feel like I was making a choice for myself, even if it was reckless." The truth of her words hit hard. I could see the pain behind them, the exhaustion of being seen as someone you never asked to be. I leaned back, taking it in. "That's a lot," I admitted. "But you don't seem like the kind of person who's had it easy, no matter how it looks on the surface." She met my gaze, and in that moment, all the layers, money, family names, road dust, faded into the background. "We're not so different, are we?" she said softly. "You've been running from something too, just on a different kind of road." She wasn't wrong. "My past has its own ghosts," I told her. "A lot of them, actually. I've spent more nights chasing regrets down the highway than I care to count. Figured I'd never stop moving long enough to figure out what it all meant." She reached across the table, just resting her hand near mine. Not touching, just close. "I didn't want to be the person I was becoming. I wanted to find something real. And last night, when you stopped to help me, that was the first time in a long while I felt seen. Not for my name or my history. Just me." It was a strange feeling, hearing her say that, because for the first time I felt it too. Like maybe we'd both just been waiting for someone to understand without asking questions. "Takes guts to step away from what's expected," I said. "Most people just learn to live with the weight." We kept talking, pouring our stories into the space between us like we were unloading years of silence. She told me about growing up in mansions she never felt at home in, always watched, always performing. Her world was made of gala dinners, media statements, and decisions she never got to make. And I shared my own version of being trapped, except mine came with bills I couldn't pay and roads that never ended. Sketchy bosses, broken down trucks, and a constant fight to stay ahead of a life that always seemed to be one step behind me. We didn't need to explain every detail. The pain was there, shared and understood in a way that didn't need much translating. As the sun climbed higher and the light poured through the diner windows, something started to shift. The lines between who we were and who we were supposed to be, they blurred a little, and for once it didn't feel like either of us was running. Her confession had opened something inside both of us, a quiet kind of bravery, one that didn't scream or demand attention, but stood there firm, like, "This is me, and I'm done hiding." In that little diner, in the middle of nowhere, I stopped seeing the highway as just a place of emptiness. It had brought us here, to this table, to this moment, 2 people who were never supposed to meet, finding something that felt like a beginning. As we pulled away from the service station, that soft, early morning light bathed the desert in gold, casting long shadows behind us and painting the road ahead with something I hadn't felt in a long time: possibility. The air still held a chill, but the sky was wide open, like it was giving us permission to start again. Neither of us said it out loud, but we knew something had shifted. This wasn't just a ride anymore. What started as a late-night rescue was becoming a journey, not to any specific place, but to face the things we'd both been running from. For the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't just passing through my life. I was moving towards something. Or maybe someone. The miles rolled by and the conversation turned sharper, more loaded. Emily started sharing pieces of her life she hadn't dared say before. Stories that felt too heavy for someone her age to carry. My father built his empire on backroom deals and quiet threats, she said, eyes locked on the horizon. I grew up in a world where everything had a price. Including me. Her voice cracked with bitterness and I could feel the weight of every word. I was the trophy daughter. The perfect product of the Langford legacy. But behind the wealth, the power, it was all just control. Lies. My dreams didn't stand a chance. I listened, letting the sound of the engine and the wind fill the space between her confessions. I'd met a lot of people broken by poverty, but it turns out wealth can scar just as deep. What do you want now? I asked gently. After all this? She turned to me, her gaze hardening with something fierce. Freedom, she said. I want my life back. And I want to expose what's really going on inside my father's empire. I've got the evidence, names, dates, transactions. But I can't do this alone. I need someone who knows what it means to fight uphill, someone I can trust. Then she looked at me, really looked at me, and said something that stopped my heart cold. I need you, Luke. It hit me like a freight train. Just a few hours ago, I was a guy hauling freight through the middle of nowhere, thinking about where to grab my next cup of coffee. Now here she was asking me to stand beside her in a battle that could cost us everything. But maybe it was exactly what I'd been waiting for. You've got me, I said, my voice steady. I've been swinging at shadows for most of my life. Maybe it's time to take a real shot at something that matters. She nodded, and for a moment, the air between us buzzed with a strange kind of electricity, purpose, fear, maybe even hope. The road narrowed as we passed through a craggy stretch of rocks and winding turns. It was the kind of landscape that looked as unpredictable as the road ahead of us. That's when she reached into her bag and pulled out a worn leather notebook, the kind that didn't just hold thoughts but secrets. This, she said softly, is everything. Proof of how deep it goes. The deals. The threats. The cover-ups. It's all in here. I didn't even get a chance to flip it open before the cab started to vibrate with a low, unmistakable rumble. Not the truck, something behind us. I checked the mirror. My gut twisted. A line of black SUVs was closing in, fast. Their headlights glared like the eyes of something hungry. We've got company, I muttered, slowing just enough to get a better look. Emily's expression turned pale. They found me. Stay calm, I said, shifting the truck slightly off the main path. Let me handle this. Within seconds, the convoy surrounded us. Doors opened. Men in dark suits stepped out, polished, cold, and dead behind the eyes. Not cops. Not federal. Private muscle. The kind hired to clean up corporate messes without leaving a trace. One stepped forward, voice clipped and sterile. Miss Langford. Step out of the vehicle. Now. I felt Emily's hand on my arm, not fear, not really. Regret. Like she didn't want me to get tangled in her war. But there was no way I was stepping back now. I opened the door and climbed down slowly, planting myself between her and them. My voice came out rough but solid. Not while I'm here. It was the kind of moment you don't plan for, where something in you snaps into place. A line drawn. A stand taken. The sun had disappeared behind the rocks and the desert fell into that eerie half-light where anything can happen. I could feel the weight of it all, her secrets, their threats, the ledger still sitting on the dashboard. It was no longer just her fight. It was ours. And in that split-second standoff, I knew the road ahead was about to get a lot rougher. That simple act, stopping to help a woman on the side of the road, had pulled me into something bigger than I ever imagined. A world of power and danger I'd spent my whole life just barely skimming past. But now? I was in it. And there was no turning back. Chaos came fast, like a storm breaking all at once. 1 second we were locked in a standoff, surrounded by black SUVs and cold-eyed men. The next, we were fighting to survive on a stretch of highway that suddenly felt more like a battlefield than a backroad. They moved in with practiced precision, weapons drawn, expressions blank. But I'd been in tight spots before. Maybe not like this, but enough to know when it's time to run and when it's time to fight. All those years on the road? They teach you things. How to stay calm when everything around you turns sideways. How to read terrain like a map etched in instinct. And in that moment, with the woman beside me clutching a notebook that could blow open an empire, every survival instinct I had came roaring to life. I gripped the wheel and threw the truck into motion, angling us through a narrow slit between jagged rock faces. Hold on. I shouted over the engine's growl. She didn't scream. Just wrapped her arms tight around that leather-bound ledger, holding it like it was more than just evidence, like it was her last link to freedom. Then the first shot rang out. It cracked through the air, hit the dirt just feet from us, and I knew this wasn't about intimidation. They were ready to end it right there on that road. You're not taking her. I shouted through the open window, my voice rising with the kind of fury that comes from a lifetime of being stepped on. She's not your property. And neither am I. They didn't respond with words. Just more bullets, more tires screeching, more engines howling behind us. But they were chasing the wrong truck. I wasn't about to let them win. I slammed the brakes and twisted the wheel, reversing into a hidden canyon I'd spotted earlier. It was tight, barely wide enough for us, but I knew I could make it. I'd driven rigs through mountain passes in the dead of winter. I wasn't about to lose to a bunch of suits. The canyon walls closed around us like armor, forcing them to slow down. Their big shiny vehicles weren't made for this kind of fight. But mine was. We kept moving, dodging rock slides, plowing through narrow bends, and through it all, she stayed right there beside me. Scared? Yeah. But steady. Stronger than most people I've known. I'm not gonna let them hurt you, I told her, breath ragged, hands shaking as I worked the wheel like my life depended on it, because it did. So did hers. She looked at me and despite everything, she smiled. You've given me something I thought I'd lost, she said. Hope. And I realized then this wasn't just about survival. This was about reclaiming something. For both of us. She held that notebook tight. Inside it, the truth about her family, the lies, the corruption. And that truth? It was power. The kind they wanted buried deep. But we didn't let them win. By the time the sun peeked over the rocks again, painting the desert with soft orange and gold, they were gone. The convoy had pulled back. Either they didn't want to push their luck in daylight, or maybe we'd shaken them harder than they expected. The land was scarred where we'd fought, but we were still standing. Dust-covered, bruised, hearts pounding, but alive. Changed. My truck took a beating, but it kept rolling. Just like me. As we coasted along the empty road, the silence between us finally gave way to something lighter. Not relief, not exactly. But a breath. A moment to feel. She looked over at me and I saw it in her eyes, the same thing I felt deep in my gut. We'd made it through. Together. I never thought picking up a stranger would lead to all this, I said with a dry laugh, voice rough. But I do know one thing, even in the worst moments, there's always a chance to make something right. Her hand found mine. It trembled, but it was steady where it counted. You taught me that real strength doesn't come from where you were born or how much power you hold, she said. It comes from standing up when it matters. Even when you're scared. Even when you're alone. We didn't talk much after that. Didn't need to. Eventually, she'd have her own road to walk, courtrooms, headlines, the fight to bring truth to light. And me? I'd go back to the highways. But I wouldn't be the same man who started this drive. When we finally parted ways, it hurt more than I thought it would. Not because of romance, not exactly, but because something about meeting her had pulled me out of the fog I'd been living in for years. She gave me something more powerful than gratitude. She gave me purpose. As I turned the wheel and eased back onto the open road, it felt different. Not just another route on the map. It was a beginning. A blank slate. The memory of that wild, impossible night stayed with me and the promise of redemption lit the path ahead. Mile after mile, I drove on. Not just to deliver freight, but to remind myself of something I'd almost forgotten. That one act of kindness, one decision to stop to care can change everything. Because sometimes, in the most unexpected places, life throws you exactly where you need to be.